There are letters sitting in the Portuguese National Archives in Lisbon right now, written by an African king to a European king, begging him to stop stealing his people, his nobles, his grandchildren. Those letters were ignored. His grandson was put on a ship, branded, taken to Brazil, and that grandson, a prince, went on to build a kingdom inside the stomach of slavery itself. That is just one story from one family out of millions. This is Enuane Cultural Forum, and today we honor the millions by starting with 10. Welcome back. If you're new here, this is Enuane Cultural Forum, where we promote Africa's rich history and cultural heritage. Please support us by hitting the subscribe button. Now let's get into it. People assume the identities of those taken in the Atlantic slave trade are lost forever. They are not. Through shipping logs, oral histories, linguistic records, and the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, which has documented over 36,000 slave voyages, we can identify real people, real kingdoms, and real names. Between the 15th and 19th century, around 12.5 million Africans were forcibly loaded into ships. Nearly 2 million died in the water before reaching the land. These were not nameless masses. They were the Wolof, the Bakongo, the Mbundu, the Yoruba, and most prominently, the Igbo. Today, we speak their names. At number 10, the Chamba of northern Nigeria and Cameroon. The Chamba were formed through the merging of two peoples, the Dakar and the Leko speakers, building a shared civilization over centuries. That world was shattered by Fulani jihadists of the 18th and 19th centuries, which swept through the region, capturing tens of thousands for the Atlantic slave trade. But the Chamba fought back. They retreated into the Atlantika and Mandara mountains, reorganized, and launched counterattacks against slave trading caravans. Sustained organized resistance, not panic. Many were still taken. Today, we remember them. At number 9, the Wolof of Senegal, Gambia, and Mauritania. In the 14th century, the Wolof founded the Wolof Empire and one of the most significant political structures in medieval West Africa. They were among the first West Africans encountered by the Portuguese explorers in the mid-15th century, documented as a sophisticated, organized civilization. Internal wars and the violent jihad movements of the 17th and 18th centuries drove mass enslavements of Wolof populations. Many were shipped to Louisiana and the Caribbean, where linguists have traced Wolof loanwords surviving in Louisiana, Creole, and African American vernacular English, words that crossed an ocean and outlasted the people who carried them. At number 8, the Abron and the broader Akan world of Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Burkina Faso. The Akan, including the Ashanti, Fante, Boale, and Ebron, share a matrilineal system of descent and one of the most sophisticated cultural traditions in West Africa. Living at the heart of what Europeans call the Gold Coast, they became central to one of the most intense slave trading zones on the continent. So many Akan peoples were taken that enslavers gave them a collective name in Jamaica, the Coromantes. Their descendants Queen Nani of the Maroons, a woman of Akan origin, liberated over 1,000 enslaved people and established a free settlement in Jamaica's Blue Mountains that the British military never defeated. She is today a Jamaican national hero. The resistance of the Akan did not begin in Jamaica, it began at home. At number 7, the Fulani. This one is complicated, and that complexity matters. The Fulani are the most widely dispersed ethnic group in West Africa, present across more than 20 nations. Rock paintings in Algeria's Tassili Neaja suggest their presence dating back to 6000 BC. They built the Sokoto Caliphate, founded by Uthman Dan Fodio in 1804, the largest empire in West African history at the time. Their jihads generated enormous numbers of captives who entered the transatlantic slave trade, but the Fulani themselves were enslaved in staggering numbers. Ayuba Suleiman Diallo was taken to Maryland in 1731 and wrote the Quran from memory in captivity before securing his freedom. Omar Ibn Said wrote his autobiography in Arabic while enslaved in North Carolina. That document is today in the Library of Congress. Raiders and victims they were simultaneously. That is the honest truth of this era. At number 6, the Mande peoples, including the Mandinka, Soninke, and the Bambara. The Mandinka built the Mali Empire at its 14th century peak, larger than Western Europe. Their ruler, Mansa Musa, distributed so much gold during his 1324 pilgrimage to Mecca that he crashed the gold markets of Egypt and the Mediterranean, a disruption that took over a decade to recover from. By most scholarly estimates, he remains the wealthiest individual in recorded human history. What survived the crossing was extraordinary. Musicologists have traced direct lines from the griot oral tradition and the kora to the blues, jazz, and the foundations of African American music. When Alex Haley traced his ancestry in roots back to Kunta Kinte, he was tracing it to a Mandinka man from the Gambia. At number 5, the Fon people of Benin. The Fon founded the Kingdom of Dahomey in the 17th century, home to the Agoje, an elite regiment of female soldiers, numbering between 1,000 and 6,000 at their peak. The Black Panther, Dora Milaje, were directly inspired by these real women. What the Fon carried across the water proved more powerful than anything that could be taken from them. Their spiritual tradition, voodoo, became the philosophical backbone of the Haitian Revolution of 1791, the only successful slave revolution in recorded history. Revolutionary leader Dottie Buckman launched the uprising at the Boaz Cayman Voodoo Cemetery that unified enslaved people across the island. A people the world tried to erase used their ancestors' wisdom to free a nation. At number 4, the Bakongo of Central Africa. They built the Kingdom of Congo, a state of 2 to 3 million people with 6 provinces, a centralized tax system, a diplomatic corps. When Portuguese explorers arrived in 1483, they encountered a civilization that engaged them as equals. Between 1514 and 1526, King Afonso I, Nzinga Mbemba, wrote a series of letters to King João III of Portugal, preserved today in the Portuguese National Archive in Lisbon and translated by historian Basil Davidson, in the African past, in his letter of July 6, 1526, he documented, "Each day the traders are kidnapping our people, children of this country, sons of our nobles and vassals, even people of our own family. Our land is entirely depopulated." Those letters were ignored. The Congo fell at Battle of Mbwila in 1665. The prince Ganga Zumba, meaning Great Lord, in Kitongo, was taken to Brazil in chains. He escaped, organized, and built Quilombo dos Palmeiras, a free African settlement sheltering an estimated 30,000 people that resisted military expeditions for nearly 90 years. A prince built a kingdom inside the country that enslaved them. At number 3, the Mbundu people of Angola. Angola was the single largest source of enslaved Africans in the Atlantic slave trade. The Transatlantic Slave Trade Database estimates 5.7 million people were embarked from West Central Africa, over 45% of all Africans taken to the Americas. The Mbundu produced one of the largest resistance figures in African history. When Nzinga Mbande of Ndongo and Matambe, born around 1583, she negotiated directly with Portuguese governors, forged military alliances with the Dutch, and led her armies personally into battle. She fought for her people until her death in 1663 at approximately 80 years old. She never surrendered. The martial arts, Copiora, the word Samba, from the Kimbundu, Semba, and the foundations of Afro-Brazilian spiritual traditions traced directly to Mbundu. Brazil today has an estimated 55 million people of African descent, majority tracing their roots to Angola and Congo Basin. At number 2, the Yoruba people of southwestern Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. Their city of Ile-Ife has been continuously inhabited for over 6,000 years. Bronze and terracotta sculptures excavated there, dating to the 13th centuries, were so refined that early European archaeologists refused to believe they were of African origin. The Wolof Empire, at its height in the 17th and 18th century, was one of the largest states in West African history. When Oyo collapsed under Fulani pressure in the early 19th century, the wars that followed produced a catastrophic surge in Yoruba enslavement. An estimated 500,000 to 1 million Yoruba, taken primarily in the 19th century, arriving in the Americas with particularly intact cultural memories. The result is documented across continents. In Cuba, Yoruba tradition became Lukumi, Santera. In Brazil, Condombele. In Trinidad, Shango. Scholars estimate 100 and 200 million people globally practice Yoruba-derived spiritual traditions today. A people taken in chains, their gods cross the ocean with them. The Yoruba also produced Wole Soyinka, the first African to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. Their cultural footprints are on every continent, and they are a worthy number 2 on any honest list. At number 1, the Igbo people of southern Nigeria. And before anyone debates this ranking, let the evidences speak. The Igbo number over 75 million people across the world today, occupying the Niger Delta region east of Niger River. One of the most culturally dynamic civilizations in African history. The Bight of Biafra was the second largest slave exporting region in Africa during the peak of the 18th century trade. Historians estimate between 1.4 and 1.7 million Igbo people were taken primarily to Virginia, Maryland, Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad and Tobago. And what they built in these places under the worst conditions in human history is nothing short of extraordinary. In Virginia and Maryland, the Igbo presence was so numerically dominant that they shaped the very foundations of African American culture. Linguists have traced Igbo grammatical structures and vocabularies directly into the Gola Creole, the most intact African-derived language in North America, still spoken today in sea islands of South Carolina and Georgia. Gola people, their food, their storytelling, their spiritual practices carry Igbo DNA in ways academics are yet to fully understand. In Trinidad, the Igbo cultural impact was so profound that it gave birth to an entirely new musical tradition called Calypso. Ethnomusicologists, including John Coley and Maureen Warner-Lewis, have documented Igbo linguists and rhythmic patterns at the roots of early Calypso music. The Kaiso, the original name for Calypso, contains direct Igbo linguistic traces, a musical tradition that eventually gave the world Mighty Sparrow, Lord Kitchener, and became the cultural heartbeats of the Caribbean, traces its roots to Igbo people brought to Trinidad in chains. In Jamaica and Barbados, the Igbo were known throughout the plantation system for an extraordinary and documented rate of resistance. Colonial plantation records and shipping logs show Igbo captives resisting at rates that alarmed the entire slave-owning class. The most powerful expression of this is Igbo landing in 1803. A group of Igbo captives brought to St. Simon's Islands in Georgia seized control of their slave ship, drowned their captors, and rather than submit to a life of bondage, walked into Dunbar Creek singing, choosing death as an act of collective defiance. The Gola people of the Sea Islands have preserved this story for over 200 years. It is not legend. It is documented in contemporary newspaper accounts and plantation records. In literature and intellectual history, the Igbo gave the world Olaudah Equiano, born around 1745 in what is today's Anambra State of Nigeria. Equiano was an enslaved child transported across the Atlantic and eventually purchased his own freedom. In 1789, he published the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano, one of the first and most powerful slave narratives ever written. It became an international bestseller, went through 9 editions in his lifetime, was translated across Europe, and became one of the most important abolitionist documents in history. British Parliament cited it directly in the debates that led to the abolition of slave trade in 1807. The Igbo man's pen helped end the legal slave trade of an empire. In spirituality, the Igbo carried their cosmological worldview centered on Chi, the personal divine spirit, and the concepts of Ordinary, a sophisticated spiritual and ethical system governing the relationship between the living, the dead, and the divine. Elements of Ordinary merged with Caribbean spiritual traditions, particularly in Trinidad and Jamaica, where Igbo-derived spiritual concepts were documented by ethnographers as late as the 20th century. The concepts of personal spiritual destiny, Chi, echoes in the religious philosophies of diaspora communities who never knew its origin. In social organizations, the Igbo carried something that made them distinctly ungovernable to slaveholders, a civilization built not on kings, but on councils, age grades, title societies like the Ozo system, and democratic deliberation known as Ijume. The Igbo village assembly, the Ohaneze, gave every voice a place at the table. This cultural philosophy of radical communal equality expressed itself repeatedly in the diaspora as an instinctive, fierce, and organized resistance to hierarchy imposed by force. Slaveholders documented this. They called the Igbo difficult, ungovernable, proud. They meant it as a compliment. We receive it as a compliment. And the Igbo story did not end with the slave trade. Share this video. Someone in your network needs to see this today. Subscribe to Enwane Cultural Forum. Drop a comment telling us how you feel if you are moved by this story. This is Enwane Cultural Forum. We do not forget. Thanks for watching. I will see you in my subsequent videos. Bye!